a lot of what Solomon is talking about, and we know this, we believe that Solomon wrote a lot of this, okay, is the difference between what we perceive and what is real. Because he says that, oh, that temptress out there, she looks all tempting, it looks all good, but it's gonna lead you down a really bad path, right? That's part of the metaphor that he uses. This woman that would lead you down a wrong path, right? And she looks so good and everything about her looks so good. So here he's saying, look, stolen waters appear to be sweet, okay? They seem sweet to you. Bread eaten in secret seems pleasant. By bread eaten in secret, again, we're talking about something that you're hiding because you shouldn't be doing it, but you're doing it. So it's like, don't fall for the deception or the illusion that these things are actually sweet and pleasant. Because he says he doesn't know that the dead are there. In other words, doing these things eventually lead to death. But they seem pleasant at the time. You know, Paul says things like that, and others are, in the New Testament say things like, there's that which seems pleasant at the time, but then we realize later it's not good. And so when he says that he made man in his image, we have all of these things that are very similar to him that would make us related. Like if somebody saw us and somebody saw him, they would say, oh, you're an offspring. Anybody ever had anybody say, oh, you're just like your mother, or you're just like your father, or you're in some way, or you look just like, or you've acted, or you do a behavior that's just similar to somebody? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree type of thing, right? When Yeshua was asked by good old Thomas, show us the Father and we'll believe. And he's like, well, you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So he's saying is, not that the Father looks exactly like Messiah. He says, but I am as like him as anyone can be. So when you see me, you get as great an understanding of him as you can get. Because I act like him, I think like him, I make decisions like him. It is not our concern, issue, or problem to figure out his plan for people with problems or people with disabilities. We just have to know that he has one. See, a lot of things that have to do with Elohim, we want to figure out the details and understand the whole plan. When he just wants us to trust that he has one. You know, that was kind of when he took them out of Egypt, they didn't know what was going on. They had to trust that he had a plan, that he was taking them somewhere. Then when he had them covenant, they had to agree to all of that without even knowing what was in forget about reading the fine print. There was no print. He hadn't started telling them anything yet. He wanted them to sign before even knowing what it was, purely based on their understanding of who he is. So I believe, as it tells us in many places, that he's El compassionate, merciful, filled with loving kindness. Some of what I need you guys to do is you're gonna have to use this 9 pounds or whatever it is above your shoulders and start being a little bit more rational and logical. You're not looking at the Creator always with that logic and rational thinking, right? You're looking at him through Christianity or some other way. And so you don't want to see that because Christianity has taught you basically this is it, and then you get judged and that's it. But I don't see that in Scripture that way necessarily, okay? Because there are so many things that he says. Look, when you look at the things that he says, think of it like you're putting a giant puzzle together, and you cannot leave pieces in the box. All things have to fit together, but when you put in a piece, especially in these bigger puzzles, sometimes it almost might fit, but it doesn't, and you gotta be really careful you don't put in a wrong piece. But all pieces must be used, and they have to fit perfectly. Here's the exciting, scary, whatever part of it is that I'm not done. There are still more things I'm gonna share with you that you're gonna be like, what? Are you going to be open to look at it from a logical, rational, unfiltered point of view, or you're gonna be stuck filtering it through all that other stuff that you were raised with? And not just raised with meaning from your parents, but raised with when you started raising yourself. Because some of you, like in your 40s and 50s, you know, whatever you were influenced by and what you chose to do and how you went in your adult journey. You know, you were raised by your influences. Can we agree with that? All your inputs are part of why you are the way you are. I mean, that's what developed you into this. You had all these inputs and the choices you made based on those inputs. This is the result, you, today.
And you mentioned that Jews don't believe that the Messiah has come yet. Why exactly is that?
Because they have, okay, and I guess I've looked into some things that have given me peripheral understanding of this more recently. They have a very clear, I think delusional, but clear understanding of a checklist of things that Messiah has to do to be Messiah. That checklist doesn't necessarily appear here. Some of the stuff in their checklist is purely out of their traditions, but their expectations for someone to be Messiah is they have to check all these check boxes. And Yeshua didn't check all their check boxes. By the way, this is part of the problem you see with Judas, right? Judas, we get the sense, even though it doesn't say it that way, but we get the sense that Judas was a zealot who expected Yeshua to basically overthrow the Romans and bring the kingdom right there. Now, in your case, you're trying to help a lot of people with this caregiving business. And yes, this is like I said this the other night. If you're the boss and nobody shows up, I literally just said this, right? Then you have to show up, okay? Now, I don't have a problem with you caregiving on Shabbat. I mean, somebody has to do it. And you know what? If I needed it, I would need someone to do it. And I have family members, like at this point, I think my father-in-law really needs somebody to be there every day, which would include Shabbat. Your challenge, though, is the business and the model of the business and how do you pay or not pay and how that works with all of that, okay? Let me come up with some sort of more, we'll call this the Deuteronomy 17 sort of thing. This is why we need our own sort of, I don't want to call it a Talmud necessarily, but our own way of taking things and coming up with how do you apply this in today's world? How do you balance these things out? And that's what we need for now. But the thing is, he was taught in Christianity where reward and salvation are the same thing. If you have salvation, you have the reward. Well, Yeshua provided for salvation for everybody that ever lived or will live at the same time. But not everybody gets the reward because the reward is based on what you do. Which, by the way, Paul says this in Romans 2. His big hero, Paul, this guy. Read him from Romans 2. Okay, in Romans 2, verse 5, but according to the hardness of your unrepentant heart, you are treasuring up for yourself wrath in the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of Elohim, who shall render to each one according to his works. Everlasting life, a reward based on works, to those who persist in doing good. And by what is good? Go listen to my teaching, Well Done, Good and Trustworthy Servant. What is good? Torah is good. Only things Yahweh says is good. And wrath to those who are self-seeking and don't obey the truth, in verse 8. It's what you do gets you a reward.
This is where it starts when that group of people ends up with a target on their back and ends up being oppressed. It's from that point on, isn't it?
Well, look, you see this happening to people all the time. Look, if you're successful in any kind of industry that you're in, you're going to be attacked. Everybody attacks those at the top, especially if you started off in the bottom, the people that you left behind and you started climbing up that ladder, who now just see your butt. They start throwing things at it because they don't want you to climb out from where they are. And success always breeds haters. There are those that'll be proud of you, but a lot of people are going to be haters, and they're not going to like the success. And so, yeah, no, I could see that definitely happening. Look, that's part of why the Jews got picked on throughout the centuries, because they were almost always successful wherever they were, and so they had wealth and they had other success that people then wanted to take from them. There's two aspects to this. One is when we're doing to others, it demonstrates how we do to him. Other parts of it is when we do unto others, it demonstrates how much we're becoming like him. So it's not just a do unto him, but when we're patient with people, when we have compassion on people, when any kind of the aspects of the fruit of the Spirit that we're applying in our relationships with people, that's what we're talking about also. So it's not just as I do unto you, it's like I do unto him, but it's as I do unto you, I demonstrate how much I become like him. Does that help? Does that make more sense?
Yes, that makes a lot more sense.
Okay. So when it's vertical, it's probably demonstrates how you would treat him as well. When it's horizontal, it's more about expressing yourselves in a way like him. Or when it's below you, somebody that, like when you're dealing with a child, when you're dealing with somebody that would vertically be below you, okay? Or you're an employer and you have employees and how you treat them, those you're responsible for. You demonstrate how much you become like him